Welcome to Carolina Stories of the American Revolution. I'm Dallas Reese, and we are on site today in historic downtown St. Augustine, Florida. I'm right at the corner of King Street and St. George at the Trinity Parish, which was built in 1821, and it was a site where the British worshipped as well. Anglicans did during the American Revolution, and then a Charleston minister actually started a division of the Protestant Episcopal Church here after the American Revolution. Now, you probably are asking yourself, why are we here in St. Augustine talking about Carolina Stories of the American Revolution? Because during the American Revolution, this was a very important site, at least for Carolinians, because 3 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were imprisoned here. And we're going to take you across the street and tell you more about that in just a sec. Welcome back to Carolina Stories of the American Revolution. I'm Dallas Reese, and I'm here today in downtown historic St. Augustine, Florida, which during the American Revolution was a place the British had a stronghold. And they also had a prison here that they kept patriots. I'm right at the corner of St. George and King Street, and near this spot was a prison. It was an old state house that was unfinished, and they housed Patriot prisoners. And why is this so important to South Carolina? Well, because 3 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were imprisoned here after the fall of Charleston. Now, Charleston in 1780, May of 1780, was taken by the British, and they captured about 5,000 soldiers, and they also captured a lot of politicians, merchants, other people from downtown, important people, and of course our officials, Thomas Hayward Jr., Arthur Middleton, and Edward Rutledge, who all 3 had basically signed their death warrant when they signed the Declaration of Independence back in August of 1776. By the way, did you know that? The independence, of course, the Declaration July 4th, but only one person signed it that day, John Hancock. The rest of the signers signed almost a month later in August of 1776. Well, the British had found themselves 3 very good prisoners when they came to Charleston, and they took them here to this prison. The sign is pretty interesting. It reads, "Prisoners of War in St. Augustine during the American Revolution. From the onset of the American Revolution in 1775, the British Crown colony in East Florida was a loyalist bastion. In its capital here, St. Augustine, the British lodged as prisoners many American patriots and their French allies, and most of these prisoners were given the liberty of the town, but some were held in Castillo de San Marcos. A few captives rented quarters, but most of the men were housed in the unfinished state house, which stood somewhere in this area right back here at the corner of St. George and King Street in St. Augustine." Now, by the end of 1780, these prisoners included 3 signers of the Declaration. Now, of course, after the British took Charleston in May of 1780, they moved all those prisoners and our 3 signers here sometime in late August or so. There's a great reference, too. You can read more about this prison here and about the conditions of those people who were imprisoned here from the diary of Josiah Smith. He was a merchant in downtown Charleston. He was one of the ones captured here. So Arthur Middleton, Edward Rutledge, who was only 26 when he signed in 1776, and Thomas Hayward Jr. were all here, but they did have the liberty of the town. They were able to move about. It wasn't like you would think. You know, a lot of times you think of prison as being dark and dank, and it was for Christopher Gadsden from South Carolina. He, of course, did not sign a parole, but these 3 guys, our signers, did sign a parole, which preserved some of their freedoms just to be able to move about and get around the town. They did something pretty defiant on July 4th, 1781, too, while they were still imprisoned. They held a celebration, and they rewrote the words to "God Save the King." They rewrote it to say, "God save the 13 colonies, the 13 United States. May we be victorious and glorious." And it was pretty, well, it was defiant, and it didn't please the British at all. But they also toasted George Washington on that day. So these guys believed in the cause, and they were not afraid to stand up for what they believed in. And later that same month, in July of 1781, after they had that celebration, they were released in a prisoner exchange with the British and were able to return to South Carolina. So here we are. That's Trinity Episcopal Church by the way, and it is right near where this old state house was when these guys were captured in May of 1780 and brought here 3 or 4 months later. So this is why it's so important to South Carolina that we're in St. Augustine, because this was a big prison for the British and it captured a lot of patriots. And of course, read that diary from Josiah Smith. I believe you can find it on JSTOR, an academic site. You also could probably find it in the South Carolina Historical Review from the 1930s. I know they printed portions of that diary. He was imprisoned here that time, and he kept the diary of what happened to all those guys while they were here for that year or so they were here. This is just a fascinating place to visit too. There's so much history in this town. The Spanish, of course, founded this town. It's the oldest town in the entire country. And this Plaza de la Constitución is just a lovely place to kind of hang out at this park and enjoy. So if you get a chance, come to St. Augustine, check out the Revolutionary War history here. And there's a cool Civil War cannon right here too. But there's just all kinds of history here, and it's just an awesome place. So I hope you enjoyed this content on the American Revolution and our 3 signers, Thomas Hayward Jr., Arthur Middleton, and Edward Rutledge from South Carolina. If you enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe below. And join me for more. Of course, you can look us up on Facebook, Carolina Stories of the American Revolution, and you can Google our name to find our website. Thanks so much. Dallas Reese. We'll see you next time from another historic American Revolution site.